Hey guys, I want to talk to you about Pesach again. The last video was about chametz and the meaning of chametz. Chametz as the rot at the heart of civilization, and that ever since the invention of agriculture, cities and slavery have gone together, and that there's something wrong that we're trying to leave behind. This video, I want to take a slightly different angle, and I want to talk about Egypt as stone. Egypt as civilization and the past, civilization as a burden, civilization and the past as a weight that bears down on us and makes us suffer and is unpleasant, that we want to escape from, that we cry out from under. So let me start off by talking a bit about the meaning of stone. Civilization is stone. Stone is evidence that there has been a world around a long time before we ever came around. The mountains, the bedrock below us, they've been around forever, and we know that we have come late in time. And even the human world, in America we don't see this so much, but in many places in the world you see stone ruins, and you know that there were civilizations that were there before you showed up or your civilization showed up. And even the world that you're born into, the stone buildings, the big skyscrapers downtown, or the houses around you, the world that's been built up around you, the world that is built of stone, you didn't build it. You've inherited that. That came from the past. Some from the more recent past, but some from the distant past. Stone is the past that you've inherited. Stone, unlike trees, unlike crops, unlike light, it's always there. Some things come and go, but stone represents that which it's always been there. It's been eternally there. It never changes. From perhaps over time, stone gets worn down by the weather and by the rain, but in our short experience, we don't see that happening. Civilization may change over time, and perhaps there are revolutionary moments in time, but for the most part, our experience of the past as we've inherited is that things don't change very quickly. Civilization is the bedrock of our lives. It's the foundation on which we live. We could not live with all the technology and all the culture that we've inherited from those who came before us. It would be very hard for us to live without all the methods of food production that have been developed over time, with all the medicines that have been invented, all the means we have of transporting ourselves and our stuff from place to place, communications. We are dependent on toilet paper. You need toilet paper. Toilet paper is a pretty recent invention, but it's unimaginable that we'd have to live without it. You better stock up. We need that. We depend on that. We stand on that. We could not live. Civilization in the past is what we stand on to exist. It protects us from the ravages of nature. If not for our medicines, what might COVID-19 do to us? What might other natural disasters do to us? We fend off the natural world through all the things that we human beings have invented over time, that have been given to us, things that we did not create. Civilization is both the bedrock and a fortress. It protects us, and it is essential. It is essential to our lives. Culture, too, is part of that. All the ways of living that has been given to us, say things like all the rights that have been written up in our Bill of Rights, all what we consider a good life, how a good person lives, how a person should behave, basic ideas that we've inherited in time, like the notion that we should all be equal under the law, or that we should be presumed innocent in a court of law. All the cultural and the entire cultural inheritance of the past is something we also depend on. It is the past this is the past manifesting itself in a good way as what we have, and we depend upon it. And it's no mistake that God is often talked about as a rock, as stone. Hanukkah we sing Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati, God is our rock. Or we say in benching Migdal Yeshuat Malko, that God is a fortress who protects. It's no mistake that we use this same language in talking about God, because this is God as God manifests as Father or King, as the very foundations of our civilization. God, at least in one guise, perhaps not God as infinite, but God as lawgiver, and God as creator of this world that we live in. God is something you can depend upon, and God is what defends us from the chaos. Our laws are etched in stone. The Ten Commandments are written in stone. When Bnei Israel crossed into the land of Israel, they were instructed to set up 12 huge rocks on which the Torah would be written, similar to the idea that when the Romans put on 12 tablets of the law in the center of Rome, so you know what the law is. Now, it's possible that our sense of the law has changed over time, because we have much more sense of that we change the law, we legislate and create laws. And there's a sense of there being Torah Shabbal Peh that humans are involved in making. But there's also still a sense that the very basic laws, the very fundamentals of life that are nearly universal, these are etched in stone. Do not kill. Do not steal. The very basic laws that exist, not necessarily as written laws, that are just, these are the ways that human beings live. There is a very basic sense that the law is etched in stone. And we memorialize the past in stone. I think I once read to some of you the poem Ozymandias of this great statue that's toppled in the desert. So sometimes the past we see, as I mentioned, as ruins, but then there are still memorials we go to. We can go to the Lincoln Memorial. We can go see the Washington Monument. And we learn about the past and the greatness of the past through these stone structures. Gravestones, we commemorate the dead through stone. We want their memory to last forever. And so the past in general is coming down to us as stone. And this is civilization in its good manifestation. This is all the good things of the past. But that's not the only way we experience the past. And Pesach is about a very different aspect of the past, and that is Egypt as stone, as the crushing weight of the past, how the past bears down on us in a destructive way. That is the kind of stone, that is the civilization we're talking about on Pesach, the kind of civilization we're trying to escape from. Now, of course, as I said before, there's plenty of riches to be taken, and we want to get out from under the load of the past. And we take that with us when we leave Egypt, the gold, the silver, and the gems. But the experience of Egypt itself, the past we're talking about on Pesach, is not a good experience. It's an experience of suffering and misery and crying out for escape. Someone come take us out of this. And I want to impress upon you that slavery is not just something from thousands of years ago. We are in Egypt. We are living under the burdens. Now, you go to a doctor's office, they'll ask you to rate your pain. What's your pain? 1 to 10. And thank God we generally do not say 10. We're not slaves. Our pain is not that terrible. But we still suffer pain. So 1 is still real pain. A 2 is real pain. I just want to give you some examples of what is meant by living in Egypt. One example of this is from that the 7th and 8th graders are learning about. Some 7th and 8th graders have been watching a documentary called Eyes on the Prize, which is the story of segregation and the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s. And the people, blacks, growing up in the South in that time period certainly were feeling the burden of the past. They were no longer slaves. Their pain may not be a 10, but they were living as second-class citizens, often subject to violence and with no recourse to the law. There was injustice. And there were certainly pharaohs in the South in that time period, as there are pharaohs today, people who are up to no good, who wish to do harm, people who are inflicting violence on others. If you listen to the governors talk, it's interesting to hear their defense of segregation. They don't use racist language. They know that that's not going to play well on TV. Their justification for segregation is all in the language of the past. They're preserving the traditions of the South. There's a heritage that is worth preserving. There are Southern ways that Yankees, the North should not be, the federal government should not be interfering with. The language is all of the glories of the past, but the past is a terrible burden on many, many, many people. So that's just one example of living in Egypt in recent memory. Let me talk about some other examples. Living under the burden of the past is not necessarily as a result of people wishing ill on others. Sometimes it's the result of good intentions. I'll just give you two examples that we live under today. Several decades ago, there was a very good intention that people had. Congress passed laws that were giving federal loans so more and more people can go to college. That was the intention. The consequences have been that tuitions have gone up for college. Many people have taken out loans, and many people have taken out serious amounts of loans. So part of it is their own responsibility. Perhaps they shouldn't have taken on the debt levels that they did. But many people are leaving college, owing a ton of money. And this debt to the federal government is not a debt that can be discharged in bankruptcy. Many kinds of debts, if you can say, look, I really have nothing, you can go to a court and say, hey, I really have nothing, help me out. Please forgive all the debts I have. And a bankruptcy court can do that. But you cannot get out from federal loans. And so there are people who live under the burden of the past, a suffering that didn't come out as a result of bad intentions, but of good intentions. And I'll give another example. Right now, my wife has left one job and she's moving to another. And so we're dealing with health insurance because it's a strange peculiarity of America that health insurance is tied to employment. You get your health insurance through your work. That's an accident of history. It comes out of World War II. There was wage freezes. Employers wanted to be able to pay people more. They couldn't. So, hey, we'll pay for your health insurance. And so over time, that became the way things are done in America. And that's an inconvenience. And for some people, it's much more than an inconvenience. People can end up stuck without health insurance between jobs. And then if something happens, God forbid, they end up having a tremendous debt, having to pay for all their medical expenses without any help. So that's, again, we're not talking slavery level misery, but these are examples of social arrangements inherited from the past that are very hard to change, that bear down on people. Sometimes we experience the past as a burden because the world has changed. And I'll give you an example. I think we've talked about this sometimes. Math education. The world has changed. It used to be that they said the price of learning math is learning how to calculate. You need to learn how to calculate. But today, you've got calculators. You can do addition, subtraction, decimals, fractions, long division, all that. Do that on your calculator. And not only that, in the last 10, 20 years, it's possible all these routines you learn in algebra and even calculus, you use that using machines, use computers. You have tools that do that. Most people, even who professionally use math, are not using these routines. So what should math education look like? I don't know. And we are both living under the burden. Many of you experience math as a terrible burden. So the question is, what is our curriculum to be? It's not clear what it should be. And so you live under the regime of having to learn long division, having to learn how to calculate with fractions. Some of these things you'll never learn again. And it's a burden for me. What should I be teaching you? What should a math education look like? I'm uncertain. I don't know. I haven't thought this through. Has someone else thought this through? We're in the middle of this. It's unclear what math education should look like. And so the world has changed, and the current regime we have today of math education doesn't fit our current reality. And we suffer to some degree under that. Again, not slavery level, but it is a burden that we are living with. Another example of the burden of the past is sometimes the greatest achievements of our culture can be experienced as a burden. Most of you will learn Shakespeare in high school if you haven't learned it already here at Akiba. Shakespeare becomes a burden for many people. It often becomes required reading. It's difficult to understand. People have to write papers on it that they don't want to write. And it's a shame that one of the finest accomplishments of our civilization instead becomes something wonderful and worthy of praise, becomes an experience that we want to avoid. And this is true of music. Many of you don't have an ear for classical music. And if you were to have to go to a concert, you may not enjoy that experience. I have no ear for opera. My mother-in-law loves opera. I don't care for it. I don't have an ear for it. It is very possible it's something that I am seriously missing out on. Something similar is davening in the morning. For so many of you, davening is such a burden of here are these words we don't understand, these ancient poems which are very hard to understand, and there's so many of them, and they're done day after day. It can be an experience of pain and suffering that you want to escape from, which is a shame because these poems were written as poems of wonder, amazement at the world, gratitude, trying to focus our lives on what is really important and what we should remember as Jews. And the experience of davening is something that has become quite foreign to I would say almost all of us, and it is a burden that we end up wishing to escape from. So the form of Egypt, the stone of and the past that we experience comes in many forms, and we live in it. And we should be able to exit from that suffering and be able to take the riches that are there. We should be able to love Shakespeare and love Beethoven and love math and have a law that works right and have social arrangements that function properly. So we want to leave our arrangements and take the best with us. And we celebrate Pesach because Pesach tells us, it's happened before, it will happen again. It is possible to leave that. It is possible to come out under the rock. It's possible to come out and leave the sufferings behind. We can cry out and there will be an answer. One day we will exit. So have hope. It's not the end. We can leave and we have left. And thank God for that. And so that's why we celebrate Pesach. Perhaps you can I know it's longer than the last one. Perhaps you can take pieces of this and share with your family at Seder. See you in class. Have a Chag Sameach.